Good evening. Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I am the State Section Director for MUFON LA. We have a very interesting presentation tonight, a treat. Barry Conrad, and he's going to talk to us about a film he has made called Monsters of the UFO. Following Ken Arnold's pivotal sighting of 9 mysterious disc-like objects over Mount Rainier, Washington in 1947, and the Roswell crash the following month, a flying saucer craze swept the country. Among the most riveting true-life accounts are 3 UFO encounters involving strange creatures, making them particularly fascinating to researchers up to the present day. However, so far, no logical explanation has been found for the case of the Flatwoods Monster, the Kelly Green Man, or the notorious Mothman. Award-winning filmmaker and paranormal investigator Barry Conrad takes a fresh look at these regional dramas in his latest documentary, Monsters of the UFO. Filmed on location of the original reports, Conrad and co-producer Lisa McIntosh have uncovered new witnesses who have never been come forward before. Can a 21st century approach finally explain the unexplained? Conrad earned his degree in journalism from Miami University in Ohio. He founded Barcon Video in Los Angeles and has garnered an impressive list as a crack cameraman and videographer, as well as numerous awards, including a regional Emmy. He began documenting investigations along with his colleague, parapsychologist Barry Taff, who is here tonight, but soon became the focal point of one of his investigations that he was supposed to be filming. Since then, Conrad has focused his independent production efforts on chronicling compelling range of phenomena. Conrad's last 2 documentaries, An Unknown Encounter and California's Most Haunted, recently scored the highest ratings ever on the Sci-Fi Channel's Tuesday primetime seats. If you see one movie this summer, make it Monsters of the UFO. Can you guys put your hands together, give a warm welcome to Barry Conrad. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here tonight, and it was interesting when Steve asked how many people had seen a UFO, because it looked like quite a few of you have seen this phenomena. And as you know, it's a phenomena that doesn't seem to want to go away, does it? Just as recently as I believe it was May, we had those incredible sightings that Jolene mentioned in Mexico that were videotaped on camera by the Mexican Air Force down there. I believe they were drug runners, after drug runners. And I don't know if you've seen that footage, but it's incredible because you can see these incredibly vivid balls of white light that actually go into clouds. I haven't seen all of the footage, but I heard that these objects even surrounded one of the jets, and they were picked up on the FLIR system, which is sort of an infrared system that they use on helicopters and jets of that kind. But anyway, first of all, I'd like to say a lot of people may know me from my haunting investigations. As you mentioned, I've worked with Dr. Barry Taff, my girlfriend Lisa McIntosh, who helped me co-produce Monsters of the UFO, which I couldn't really have done it without her, because she got all of the interviews lined up for this program, and it is incredible because in the course of these investigations, we're going back 50 years to some of the kind of the granddaddy cases of ufology. We're talking about the Kelly Green Men of Kelly, Kentucky in 1955. The Flatwoods Monster, that was in 1952. And of course, as many of you may have seen the Mothman prophecies, which kind of dealt with the Mothman. I don't think they totally dealt with the Mothman that I know, but they did at least do a movie about that subject. But that's a whole other ball of wax, because if you know anything about any of these sightings, especially the Mothman, it's probably the Mothman is the most incredible phenomena of the 20th century, at least in paranormal circles. Maybe some of you read John Keel's book. John Keel was the pioneer of the Mothman prophecies. He wrote the book and was the first investigator on the scene. And some of that material was absolutely incredible. But anyway, I want to go back a little bit in time. I for some reason, I've had weird things happen to me all my life, weird synchronicities maybe. Not only the ghost thing, I was the documentarian of the San Pedro haunting in 1989, which was one of the most violent American hauntings on record, where a ghost actually hung my sound man in an attic while I was present. Not killed, but he was actually attacked by unseen forces in an attic not far from here in San Pedro, California. And Dr. Barry Taff, who did if you've seen the movie The Entity, you've seen some of his the work that he did. That movie was based on that, and that was about a lady living in Culver City, California, back in 1974, who was actually physically attacked, supposedly raped by something she couldn't see. And if it wasn't for the fact that many balls of light, anomalies such as things moving around of their own accord, pictures on the wall, swaying back and forth, those kind of things, poltergeist type of things happen. If it weren't for those things, I'm sure he would have probably walked out, because, as scientists as he is, they want to find proof. So anyway, going back to what I was saying about a little bit about my background, in 1965, I was on a trip with my parents. I'm from Ohio originally, and we were on our way down into St. Petersburg, Florida. And I remember I was reading a book, because even back then I was interested in psychic phenomena. And I was reading this book called Stranger Than Science by Frank Edwards. Do any of you recall that book? Have any of you seen that book? I'm sure some of you read it. Anyway, it was a compilation of short stories, of true short stories about true events in the world of the paranormal. There was one story that I was reading called The Mysterious Cremation. I remember that name. I don't know how I can remember these things that far back, but it was called The Mysterious Cremation. It was about a lady by the name of Mary Reeser, who had, she died as a result of what is known as spontaneous human combustion. And I'm reading this story, and I'm intrigued by it, because I find out, as we're driving into St. Petersburg, that this story happened in St. Petersburg. And the address was 1200 Cherry Street, Northeast St. Petersburg, Florida. And we happened to be going in to St. Petersburg. We were on vacation. We were trying to find, I think one of our relatives had moved to a different location. And their name, as I recall, was Steely. And, well, lo and behold, I asked my father, I said, is there any way we could go to that house at 1200 Cherry Street, Northeast St. Petersburg, Florida? I said, I'd love to see where this cremation took place. My dad looked at me like I was, out there, because he said, do you know how big St. Petersburg is? We're not going to go out and search down some crazy story like that. Well, anyway, again, lo and behold, we find the house of our friends, our relatives, who had just recently moved, and their house faced a different street, but perpendicular to it, directly across from the street on the other side was 1200 Cherry Street. Now, I was pretty excited, because I thought about that. Now, there's going to be a lot of houses in St. Petersburg. What were the odds of arriving at that house? I wanted to be at that house, but I was excited. I even took a picture of it. I ran over to the house and I knocked on the door, and some poor lady came to the door who knew nothing about this case of spontaneous human combustion. And she goes, What? That happened here? You have to come all the way from Ohio to tell me that? I felt kind of guilty about that. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get you upset. I just figured that you knew about it. And I want to be a paranormal researcher someday, and there's no no better place to start than now. And I told her that I've been reading a book. I don't think she believed me, but I did take a picture, and I wrote it up in a scrapbook I kept of that trip, and I never forgot that. That was kind of my first little foray, as if you will, into weird synchronicities, but not knowing that I would experience haunting phenomena later in my lifetime and this and that. But I always had a very strong interest in the subject of UFOs. Used to read books. I grew up in a Catholic school back in Ohio, a little town called Fairfield, and I would bring these books on UFOs to school, and the nuns were not pleased. So, but then they talk about things like Fatima and Lords and things like that, and that's all based on faith and spirits and spiritual phenomena, and I was a believer, and I was very fascinated with all that, and I still believe that those things happen. I do believe in miracles, that they happen. But I was very interested in the subject of UFOs. And I think one of the things that really left a lasting impression on me back those years growing up, I was in high school in the 60s, so 1966, there was this very, very bizarre group of sightings, as John Keel talked about in the Mothman prophecies, that occurred not far from where I grew up, not too far, a couple of hours away, along the Ohio River. There's a place called Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's right on the Ohio border. If you go across the bridge south, you're in Gallipolis, Ohio. Well, anyway, there was these strange reports that appeared every day. They kept popping up in the newspapers about a strange winged phantom with glowing red eyes and a 10-foot wingspan that flew at incredible rates of speed and chased people in cars. And not only did it just chase civilians in cars, not too many people know about this, but it actually was known to chase a deputy sheriff in a car. Anyway, those things kind of stuck out in my mind, and of course then that culminated, of course, with the Silver Bridge collapse and all those things we'll get into a little bit later. But I was fascinated because it was like front page news every day in the Cincinnati Enquirer. And those things I think kind of shaped my interest at that time, and I found it to be fascinating. But anyway, as I got into the film industry, doing documentaries and things of that nature, I had done a couple of ghost-type related phenomena. You may have seen Unknown Counter, and we did California's Most Haunted, and those shows were on Sci-Fi Channel recently. I decided I wanted to take another twist and go into the UFO area, because that is an area that I've long been fascinated with. I've actually filmed a UFO last year. My girlfriend's daughter, Natalie, saw a UFO. Do you remember there was a flap, a kind of a short flap in LA I believe it was last September. And it didn't last that long, about a week, but it was on, I believe, CNN or some of the news stations. Talked about UFOs in, I believe, Montebello and Monterey Park. There were policemen videotaping UFOs. Well, not long after that, Lisa and Natalie spotted something outside on out by the pool. There was up over the mountains. We live up by Montrose, up in North Glendale, actually. And I grabbed my video camera, and there was a light hovering, and it was sparkling and shimmering and throwing off all kinds of bright colors. It was too bright to be a star. No other star videotaped like that. I did get it on camera. And didn't see it with the naked eye, but once we got back and looked at it on a monitor in a dark room. You have to look at it in a dark room. There's a lot of things you don't always see with the naked eye that show up in the paranormal, through paranormal photography. But there was another smaller disc-shaped object that looked dark, black, but it was accelerating away from this main object at a very rapid rate of speed, but didn't see it with the naked eye. That was probably the only UFO that I could say that I filmed, and that was recently. I thought that was interesting because we were in production with Monsters of the UFO. Now, getting back to Monsters of the UFO, Everybody talks about Roswell. I've seen a lot of shows, and there's nothing wrong with that because I think Roswell is a very significant case. But after seeing so many Roswell this, Roswell that, I kind of decided to take a different tact and try to go in a little bit different direction, because I felt that there were some cases that have been oversighted through the years that haven't been given a lot of attention to. Maybe they had they did have a certain amount of attention in the press at one time, but not so much television media exposure. And the first case that I like to talk to you a little bit about is a case that happened in 1952. And by the way, we chose cases that I felt were legitimate, they were fascinating, and there was not just a single witness on any one case. There were more than one witness. These were multiply witness cases by simple people, country people, good people, but yet they were caught up in extraordinary circumstances. Getting back to Frank Edwards' book, Stranger in Science, I think I was first introduced to this case in that book when he talked about the Flatwoods Monster. You're probably wondering, what is the Flatwoods Monster? Well, if you go into the South or any state back in the Midwest, there's all these little towns, tiny towns. Now, why people say UFOs just land there, I don't know. I'm sure they land other places, but this was a case that was extraordinary because it was witnessed by more than one person, all up and down the eastern seaboard, by the way. There were UFO sightings that night. That was the night of September 12th, 1952. And I should back up just a little bit before this event happened. And most of you who've studied or read about UFOs will know about this. The country, just about a month and a half before this amazing story I'm about to tell you happened, was, Washington, D.C., I should say, was besieged by that big flap of UFOs. In July, UFOs were tracked on radar by 3 different airports. They were also tracked visually. They were seen visually. Pilots were scrambled to chase after these bogies that appeared in the night skies over the Capitol. They were seen. But the Air Force had to do something. They called a quick press conference. And the lights in the sky over Washington were quickly dispelled as temperature inversions. Now, temperature inversions do occur, and they can appear on radar when you have a warm and cold layer of air that come together in a weird kind of a way, and you get these temperature inversions. But temperature inversions, as far as I know about temperature inversions, do not appear visually. You cannot see them as far as I know. And these objects were seen all over Washington for 2 consecutive weekends in July of 1952, and they were, every time jet aircraft were dispatched to intercept them, as soon as they were scrambled, the objects would disappear. And no sooner would the jets come back down and land, they would reappear again. So there's a very elusive nature to the phenomena. Same with ghosts, it's elusive too. But getting back to Flatwoods, just a few weeks after these famous Washington sightings, there was a group of boys playing football behind their school. And Flatwoods, West Virginia, back then, I'm sure didn't have a population of more than 200 people. It's a little small mountainous town, very quaint. It's very isolated. Lisa and I went there to film the story. We went to each location to do these stories, to get what we could of any people who may have survived, who may still be alive, and could tell us about what happened. But there was a rash of sightings that night. The eastern seaboard, as I mentioned, lit up with UFO sightings. UFOs were seen all across West Virginia. What a lot of people may not know is that the Air Force dispatched a jet that night That jet disappeared. No one's seen hide nor hair of that jet since. The Air Force won't acknowledge that, but we have the newspaper articles about that jet that disappeared. But this group of boys were playing football, and they suddenly noticed a bright red object with kind of a sputtering tail, shower sparks coming out the tail end. And it was shooting across the sky, not super fast, but they could see it very clearly. And it appeared to land on a hilltop, not far from where they were. Now, it so happened that two of the boys, their mother and them, lived right below that hilltop in Flatwoods, West Virginia. They were all excited. They came running up to their mother and they said, "Mom, Mom, we just saw a flying saucer." And of course she was somewhat skeptical, as you know she would be, until she stepped outside and she saw a glowing, pulsing red light on top of this hill. To make a long story short, she quickly called a member of the National Guard, a fellow by the name of Gene Lemon, who was 17 at the time. He just joined the West Virginia National Guard. And he came over, and when they first looked up on the hill and saw the bright light, they thought it was a plane crash. Perhaps people were injured, in trouble. But they weren't sure. But they grouped together. There was a group of boys. There were about 7 people altogether. Mrs. Kathleen May, the mother, and her 2 sons, Eddie and Freddie. And then there was Neil Nunley and Ronnie Shaver, Tommy Heyer, and a few others. And they all went up this hill. It was just at dark. As they got up as they walked up this path, I should say, a strange mist appeared all over the path. Kind of the thing you see in ghost stories, that kind of thing. The mist was it emitted there was some kind of a pungency, acidic kind of sulfuric smell to it that irritated their eyes and their skin, and they didn't know what to make of it. But as they got a little closer up this path, they suddenly saw this object even closer. Now this path kind of wound around, but at one point they could see the object pulsing up on the hill. They wanted to go closer to see what the object was. As they rounded a path, they kind of were temporarily obscured from the object. But suddenly, one of the boys noticed a pair of glowing animal-like eyes staring down from the tree. There was a big old oak tree. And the National Guardsman shined his flashlight up in the tree. They weren't sure what it was. There's all this mist around the tree. So at first it was a little bit hard to see what it was. Then suddenly, as everyone was watching, except for one of the boys was still kind of coming up the trail in the background. His name was Neil Nunley. They saw something that could not be explained by any rational means. It was something that was 10 feet tall, not your ordinary gray alien or 3 foot tall being that is so frequently reported. This thing was 10 feet tall, had a perfectly round, blood red face, glowing eyes, and an inverted ace of spades apparatus or helmet thing around its head. It also had some kind of a garment on. Now, the original sketches are probably somewhat misleading because they didn't see it for long. It was a very quick sighting because they took off very quickly after the sighting. But as you can imagine, it was a frightening moment in their lives. But the original sketch is it looks like a dress, but that's not really probably what it was. But it was some kind of a fabric. But all of the boys, everyone there actually saw the same thing because later on they drew pictures, individually, sketches of the creature. And every sketch, these sketches were done privately in different rooms, and all the sketches matched. They all matched. Psychologically, among kids at that age, it's impossible for them to have if they were making up a story like that. So something frightened them. A huge creature floated towards them, and they all ran pell-mell down this hill. And they said that one of the boys actually passed out on his way down. They got back, and of course the sheriff was called in, and they went out there. It was some time, though, before they could get the sheriff, because this is a remote area, and there were no freeways then. It was just one small little 2-lane road that went through from there to a place called Sutton, West Virginia. So they were pretty shook up by what they had seen. They were really traumatized, and actually 4 or 5 of the boys had to be hospitalized the next, not right away, but they did go see a doctor, and they were taken to the hospital for examination, and they had just, the irritation was there. I don't think they ever determined what caused the irritation. But all of them saw the same thing. When the sheriff came back to the spot, creature was gone, and the UFO was gone. But a noxious kind of odor lingered in the air. The mist was still there, and they saw it in the grass. They saw it all around the old oak tree. And it lingered there for quite some time, not a long time, but I'd say for like maybe an hour or two, something of that nature. Now, what happened to the creature, we don't know. No one knows. But another farmer, it said, who was watching this object in Flatwoods, this pulsing object after the people had fled down the hill, said he watched the object float down a little bit into a gully, like it went behind some trees, like almost as if it was trying to conceal itself, because it knew it had been spotted. But what's even more amazing is the object, as we know, flew in and landed from the sky to the ground. But according to the farmer, if his testimony is accurate, the object did not use the same route to make its exit. It diminished in size to a bubble shape, very small bubble, and actually dematerialized. That's something I don't think that had come out before, but we found that out during our investigation into this case. But anyway, we went back to Flatwoods to do the story, and Lisa and I met with Kathleen May. Kathleen May was a very, she appears to be very, very truthful. I was surprised actually that she was still alive, because this happened so long ago. She's about 90 years old. She did talk to us briefly. They normally, a lot of the people in this show did not give out interviews, because there was so much, and this is the sad part of it, so much public ridicule among a small community about anybody who sees anything strange. You know, everybody knows everybody in these small communities, and they sort of become the laughing stock. So they didn't want to be laughed at, so they finally just clammed up. But Kathleen May, we talked with her. We couldn't get everybody to talk, but we did talk with her. We did talk with a man by the name of Wally Hefner, who you'll see. He saw the object that night fly over. He had been pitching horseshoes, and he lost the game, and he sat down, and good thing he lost, because if he hadn't sat down at that moment, he probably would not have seen this glowing object flying over. But he did see it, and other people saw it. Lots of people saw this object. The National Guard came in, and the Air Force, I'm told, came in, and even though I believe some people said through the Air Force channels that they never investigated, that's not true, because we know through the people there, Kathleen May's daughter told us herself that the military came in, they closed off the area for about 3 or 4 days to a week, as I recall. And they dug up soil from the tree, near the tree, they took grass samples, and they carted it down the hill. And they kept doing this for quite some time, day in, day out. And they roped off the area. Not before a fellow by the name of Gray Barker, who was an early researcher, he went there and got a story about it and wrote it up for Fate magazine. And a fellow by the name of Ivan Sanderson, you'll hear Ivan's voice on the documentary. You're gonna see a short part of that. He did a radio broadcast in 1962 with Long John Nebel out of New York, who was a famous radio broadcaster in the realm, sort of like the Art Bell of his day. Did a lot of paranormal stuff. But Ivan Sanderson went there, and he discovered there were other objects that were seen by other people, other objects. One object, they said, even exploded in the sky at a different location, a different part of West Virginia. There was another sighting that you don't hear about too much. I don't have that clip with us tonight, but it will be in the final show of Monsters of the UFO. But there was another sighting the next night. It was reported sometime later. And a lot of people don't know about this, but there was a couple and their child. Their car broke down near a place called Frametown, West Virginia, which is not too far from Flatwoods. And they saw a pulsing light on the other side of some trees. The man got out to check out the light, and he looked, and as he went to look at the light, this creature, the same creature that Kathleen May and those boys up on the hill had described seeing, came floating out and terrorized his wife. His name is George Natowski, and he and his wife were terrorized, and the child were terrorized by this creature. When I say terrorized, I can't really say that the creature did anything menacing. It never hurt these people, but it was a very alien-looking thing. If you see something 10 feet tall coming at you, you're gonna be frightened. It came up, and when he ran back to the car, it floated back towards this mist and into this light, and it was gone. So anyway, that's one of the stories that we get into. Another story that I think was very interesting. How many people here have heard about the Kelly Green Men? Does that ring a bell? I know some of you have heard that story. This is an interesting story also. They're all interesting, but this is interesting because there were 12 people living in a little farmhouse. To put it in I don't know how to put it in other language. It was basically, these were hillbilly people. Very simple, very truthful, honest people though. And they were living in a small house in Kelly, Kentucky in 1955. Now, just 1 week prior to the incident I'm about to tell you about, in case you don't know these details, there were two women swimming in the Ohio River up, not far, up if you go up Route 41, you come to Evansville, Indiana. And at that time, there were two people, and they were swimming, two ladies, and they saw a UFO. And shortly after that, as fantastic as it may sound, one of the women was suddenly grabbed by something underwater that had a claw. And maybe web fingers, she wasn't sure. But she was grabbed by it, and tried to pull her under, and then it let go after there was a struggle. That happened. A lot of people don't know about that story, but that did happen. It was reported in all of the media at that time, in the local media. But then 1 week later, one of the granddaddy cases of close encounter, CE3K, took place. And that was in this little house, as I mentioned. There were 12 people gathered, the Sutton family and the Langfords, and they were there, and they were just having a normal little Sunday gathering. And one of the fellows by the name of Billy Ray Taylor. Now, we don't know what happened to Billy Ray. He's disappeared. He may be alive, but this has happened so many years ago. We have not tracked him down yet, but we have tracked some others down. He went out to the well to get some water from the well. And as he got the water from the well, he looked up and saw this cylindrical shaped object with all kinds of colored lights, and it was spinning around, and it looked to be landing in a gully not far from the house, behind the house actually. He rushed back in. He told all the other people about it. They were very skeptical, to say the least. So skeptical to the point that they didn't even bother to go out and look for it at first. They were that skeptical. So about an hour later, it got dark, and the dog started barking, very, very violently barking at something in the field just outside the front porch area. And as they looked out the window, they saw a glow coming in the distance, and they walked out on the porch, got a closer look, and they saw that it was a 3-foot-tall creature. 3-foot-tall, long arms, almost reaching to the ground, pointy ears, looked like a little goblin. Some people referred to this case as the goblins of Kelly. Anyway, this creature approached the house, and it got fairly close, and it actually put its hands out like this in some kind of like someone being arrested kind of a mode. And they ran in, grabbed their shotguns. You knew they were going to do that. And grabbed their shotguns, and they started blasting. That's a fine welcome to the world, isn't it? So they were blasting, and the creatures, the bullets rather had no effect on these creatures. They would roll into little balls or whatever. They would do, like float backwards and shoot off into the brush. All kinds of, it sounds like weird gymnastics of some kind, but that's kind of how they described them. And then later on, these creatures, after they went inside and barricaded the doors and windows and all that, they came up to the windows and they started looking in at the people. So, and again, they never harmed anyone, but they were looking in like they were curious. And they scared these people to death. And again, shots were fired. And the women screamed, and the children were ducking for cover, and it was, bedlam. Well, anyway, the lady that was in the house, the grandmother, her name was Glennie Langford. According to the witnesses that we talked with, because Glennie died in 1977, if everyone else had completely fabricated this amazing story, they knew Glennie would not have. She was the pillar of the community. She was a truthful person. If she said it happened, if it was there, it was there. She was a very truthful. Everyone, that's what they said over and over again. Now, Glennie died a long time ago. We met her son, Lonnie, who was a boy of about 12 at that time. And he told about seeing the creatures and come up to the windows and all, pretty much all the things I just told you about. And he said it was just absolutely amazing what they saw. Well, to make a long story short, everything stopped after several hours. There was quiet, and the people got in their trucks and they went into a place called Hopkinsville, and they met with the police there, and they were totally traumatized by this experience. And they told them, and of course the police shot out there. It was not like right next door. It was about 8 to 10 miles north off Highway 41, near what is known as the old Madisonville Road. When they got out there, on their way out there, one of the officers saw what he described as a shooting star in the sky, not shooting down, but shooting up from that area. But when they got there, unfortunately, the visitors had vanished. They did find a certain amount of bullet holes in the windows. There was some of that was found. But they did find a lot of scared people. And that's what stuck with them, that they did see the scared people, although many of them obviously were skeptical. But the police chief later said that he had gone out there, Mr. Greenwald had gone out there many, many times after that to try to determine the veracity of the story. And again, it was Glennie Langford that convinced him that something that scared the people. And those people stuck to that story all those years, and they moved out of their home. We even talked with the people who moved into the home after that. They didn't see any visitors, but they saw the evidence of the bullet holes. And they even took a photograph, which you'll see in the preview tonight, of that window. Actually, Isabel Davis took the photograph. There was a lady by that time, shortly after, she was a writer. Her name was Isabel Davis. She's passed on. But she took pictures of the area, and she interviewed the people, and I read those reports, and she was convinced that, again, something that scared these people beyond belief. These are not the kind of people that would make up a story as outrageous as this. They didn't want any kind of publicity, because it turned out that that's what happened. People started storming the grounds, trying to get souvenirs, taking pictures of the house, and all that kind of thing went on. But she didn't want that kind of publicity. None of these people. They actually moved out of their homes, chased out because of this close encounter. Anyway, when Lisa and I were back in Kelly, Hopkinsville, we assumed that a lot of the people, aside from Lonnie Langford, who was a boy, we did meet him, and we interviewed him. We assumed that most of the people are deceased, and I'm sure that most of them are. We did meet, by the way, with one of the main shooters in the incident was a guy by the name of Elmer Sutton. They called him Lucky because he had tattoos, L-U-C-K-Y, across his fingers. He used to work in a carnival. And we met his son, Elmer Jr., who told us that his father, on his deathbed, stuck to the story, and he got that indefinable fear that came into his eyes when he talked about this. Even on his deathbed, he swore that this happened. Lisa found in the phone book, because we talked with a fellow by the name of Wendell McCord. Wendell was a boy, he and his sister, they moved into the house after the Suttons moved out. And Wendell told us that there was one of the people was still alive. He was an older person from the hills. His name was O.P. Baker, and he was still alive. And we actually found him. She found him in the phone book. And we went to his home and got an interview with him, I think for the first time. I don't think he'd ever been interviewed before. His memory was starting to go a little bit, as you'll see, but he remembered the incident. His eyes lightened up when he talked about the story. And he remembered one of the things that scared him, I think, the most was when the Kelly creatures were at the house. And there's another incident I'll mention here too that happened that was phenomenal. There were all kinds of sounds on the rooftop of the house. There were scratchings and clawings and footsteps. It's almost like they were trying to come through the roof. They don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but that's what it sounded like, because there were these god-awful noises. So that was frightening. The other frightening incident that happened was that Billy Ray Taylor and Lucky, when they walked out onto the front porch, Billy Ray suddenly, this claw-like hand grabbed at his hair and actually grabbed him and pulled him up off his feet, they said. All of them testified to seeing that. They saw it out, the people inside saw it out the windows. Lucky had testified to seeing it. And so that's the only thing I would classify as a hostile act, if you can call it hostile. I guess it was hostile. But none of them were harmed. So anyway, that's one of the interesting stories, because this is going back into 1955. You're trying to go back and find these kind of dinosaurs. They're like, living dinosaurs. We found O.P. Baker. It's like, my God, we found a living dinosaur. To me, that's what it was like. And again, you don't see much about these stories. I felt like the record should be preserved somewhat as best as we can. For anybody into ufology who wants to study the early history in America of close encounter, CE3K cases, that is probably the granddaddy of them. And also, there's another significance to that case. A certain phrase, I should say, was coined from that encounter. Some people describe the creatures as green, grayish. Other people said silverish. But the press called them little green men. So when you hear the term little green men, that's where it derives from. That's the origin of little green men.
That'd be Kelly Green.
Kelly Green. That's right. The last story, perhaps the most fascinating, as we mentioned earlier, would be the Mothman. Man, myth, or monster. He was real. Anybody who looks into the story, investigates it, goes to Point Pleasant, meets with the people, sees that fear that still lingers there firsthand, will know what I'm talking about. Now, many of you probably saw the motion picture, The Mothman Prophecies. I saw it once when it first came out. I thought the atmosphere was good in the film. As far as it telling the true story, I don't think it really delved into what really happened so much. Because the bottom line of the story is there was a creature At least it was perceived three-dimensionally by everybody that witnessed it. Terrifying. Dark, gray creature. Some people said it even had feathers like a bird. Now, the locals originally called it the Winged Birdman. But I don't know, for some reason, I think Batman, a TV show, was popular at the time. So someone in the press got a hold of the Mothman and used that as a term. And it stuck. It stuck in the press as Mothman. But when Lisa and I went to Point Pleasant the first time, we'd been there several times, 3 or 4 times, you can't escape a certain indefinable kind of, I don't know if you're going to call it a malaise or feeling or vortex of energy there that's weird. I know one thing, when you go to this town, it's a neat town, by the way. I'm not saying weird to denigrate the town, because it's a lovely town. When you walk into this town, it's like walking back into time. The buildings look like they did 100 years ago. There's a hotel there called the Lowe's Hotel that, by the way, is haunted, they say. And it looks like it did 100 years ago. Everything it's just, again, like walking into a vortex or a time machine. But there's this sense of foreboding in that town. Now, maybe it's because a lot of the locals believe that the Mothman, as you might have read in John Keel's books, he talked a little bit about, maybe was a result of a curse. There was a Shawnee Indian chief by the name of Chief Cornstalk. At that time, he was gunned down by the Virginia militia because another Indian had been killed while he was having a meeting with the Virginia militia, and they felt like the Indians were going to go on the warpath again. So they killed him in cold blood, and they killed his son also. And they said as he was dying that he leveled a curse on the town. I don't really know I don't recall what the words of the curse were, but a lot of people believe that's, that the Mothman could be related to that. I don't know whether I believe that or not, but that's what a lot of people believe. There is a statue, a monument, if you will, to Chief Cornstalk, and he's buried there. But there is a certain indescribable fear in that town. But we went out to there's an area called the McClintock Wildlife Refuge, and it's about 2,500 acres, state preserve wildlife, beautiful area, and used to be the TNT area. They called it the TNT area because back during World War II, dynamite was manufactured there, and it was stored in these kind of concrete bunkers. They're rounded. They call them igloos, and they stored the TNT in those bunkers. They're all over the place. In fact, they were camouflaged at the time so that no enemy aircraft could hit them or whatever, find them. And you can still see some of the camouflage, although that's eroded, over time. But it was in this area that Mothman seemed to have a propensity for that area. It wasn't just this area, but it did appear there in more frightening terms, perhaps more than any other area. But the first encounter, as Keel had mentioned, was on the night of November 15th, 1966. And by the way, that same day, not too far away in Zanesville, Ohio, a barber by the name of Ralph Ditter got a photograph of a UFO, kind of a hat-shaped UFO, hovering over his home. Very close photograph. I've looked at the photograph as a photographer. I believe it's probably something real. It did not look fake at all to me. And he displayed that in his barbershop for many years. And I don't know if anyone else has pointed that out. I will in the final version of Monsters of the UFO, but it's an interesting, again, synchronicity that picture of that UFO, which I thought was a very excellent photograph, was taken the very day that the first Mothman sighting would occur. Now, there have been other reports of big birds. The Indians had their bird, they called the Thunderbird. I think in India they call it the Garuda. There's all kinds of words for mythological birds. But this was something else. This wasn't just a bird, it was a man like a bird because it flew. But what happened was there were two couples, Linda Scarberry, her husband Roger, and Steve and Mary Mallet, and they were in a car, and an old 57 black Chevy, and they were coming down this dirt road. They were chasing Parkers, they call it. It was kind of like a lover's lane at the time. The place that was a hangout. And but that night, it was a cold night. It was pretty desolate. As they were going down this road, they caught sight of something off to the side of the road. It looked like a man with wings standing. And this may sound ludicrous, but they said it looked like its wing, it was tugging on its wing. It was caught in kind of a guide wire, might be like a barbed wire fence there. And it was tugging on the wing, and it got it free, and it saw them. They had eye contact, but they had glowing red eyes. It looked at them, they looked at it. They were terrified. They didn't know what it was. It had the body of a man. It actually had, they never really could see its face. They could see the glowing eyes. But they did see muscular kind of legs, and it shuffled off towards this old power station called the North Power Station. It shuffled off and went inside an open door. They said, "We're getting out of here." They turned their car around in this dirt road. They started back towards Route 62, which is this is out in the country. This is about, 8 or 10 miles outside of Point Pleasant. As they got back out on the dirt road, they suddenly noticed that there's something following them. They see a pair of glowing red eyes and a 10-foot wingspan, a human-like body, and it's flying behind their car. They're saying, "Go faster, go faster. Let's get out of here." And they did. They pedaled to the metal all the way, and they were going over 100 miles an hour, and this creature kept up with them. Eventually it shot ahead of them, and it disappeared for a time, and as they rounded a curve and went down towards a place called Tiny's Drive-In, they saw the creature again sitting on top of a billboard, watching them, and then it flew off of that and disappeared. They also saw a dead dog in the road about the time they spotted Mothman. When they went later when they called the sheriff, and the sheriff came out there, again, as it always happens, the creature's gone. But they did find the dog missing, and there were strange kind of double hoof prints in the sand and along this field where it had been. Anyway, it was an amazing story. A lot of stories came out of the area of Mothman. That was the initial report. These people were very terrified. I could tell they were terrified when I looked at the original news photograph that was taken that very night. These are people that are frightened. Why on earth would they make up a story like that? There's no way. This is something real, something tangible, something that happened. And a lot of other people would see this red thing, or a thing with red eyes, flying after them. In the ensuing weeks and into the following year, there were a lot of people. There was a lady named Connie Carpenter. She was in her car. She was, I believe, somewhere in the TNC area, and she was going by a golf course. It was a small golf course. And as she was driving by the golf course, she saw this tall black figure standing in the field with glowing red eyes in the middle of the daytime. It stared at her, and as she was driving by, it flew towards her, came right down over her car. When she got home, of course she fled the scene, terrified. And as she got home, her eyes were blood red. Her skin was irritated or swollen. And that's a common thing too. I mean, not common, but it's happened in a lot of UFO close encounters. The same kind of thing. People have gotten too close to UFOs, have reported being burned. There was a case, I think, in Palm Beach, Florida, Scoutmaster years ago. Got too close, and I think his eyes were burned. I'm not sure. But these things kept going on and on and on. There were more and more sightings. People being chased. A deputy sheriff was chased. He left town. His name was Alvy Sullivan. He wanted to go across the river to Gallipolis, Ohio, work for their police department. He did not want to patrol the TNT area anymore. But this is not this is not a Twilight Zone episode. It was a Twilight Zone, but this is real. This is something that really happened, and this whole community was caught up, enveloped in this fear. Now, the next night, and you're going to see this lady shortly in the promo video for Monsters of the UFO. Her name is Marcella Bennett. And by the way, you also see a very rare interview with Linda Scarberry, who was in that first car chase. But Marcella Bennett, perhaps of all the people we interviewed, was probably the most sincere, truthful lady. When she spoke, you knew this happened to her. There's no question about it. This is a real phenomenon. She and her brother, Raymond Walmsley, were out in the TNT area the following night going to visit a friend of theirs by the name of Ralph Thomas. They were going to go visit him. He was not at home when they arrived, but his 3 children were there. So what happened was they walked up and said, well, we'll catch him later, that kind of thing. And it was dark. It was, again, like maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night. And as they were leaving, Marcella was a few yards ahead of the brother, going down towards the parked car at the end of the road. And suddenly, a red light appeared in the sky. Her brother Raymond had seen it. It was trying to get Marcella's attention, that this kind of reddish light was hovering over the area. She really didn't want to see it, but she did look. She did see the light, but didn't pay much attention to it. She didn't know much about aircraft. She thought maybe it was an aircraft. But when she did look a second time, she realized it was not an aircraft, because this is a very, very bright red light, and it was traveling very, very low to the trees. As she walked out a little further ahead to the parked car, her brother was back watching this light. A very, very interesting thing happened, a very frightening thing happened. This creature, which might have been lying on its back, she doesn't know, it suddenly rose up from behind this car, unfurled its wings, and she saw the glowing red eye. Now, she was carrying her baby daughter, who I believe her name was Tina, and she was 4 at the time. She was so paralyzed with fear that she dropped her baby and fell on top of her baby. While this creature with glowing red eyes is standing there, staring down at her. She's hypnotized, paralyzed. She was so frightened she couldn't move. Whether this was some kind of psychic paralysis, I don't know, but that's how she described it. Because she had the cigarette in her hand, it burned her fingers. She couldn't move her fingers. She heard the creature eventually flutter away, at least temporarily. She was able to get back up. She joined her brother. They ran screaming and ran into the house. I believe he saw the creature as well. They ran into the house. And they told the children to stay down. And as they turned the lights off, because they were so frightened, they didn't want anything to see them. They wanted to know what was going on, that suddenly, a few minutes later, something landed outside the house. And they heard these scuffling sounds, like footsteps shuffling onto the front porch. The creature apparently was on the front porch, and they kept looking, cowering into the corner of the room, and they suddenly saw these glowing red eyes staring in through the window of them. And then they blinked out and left. They flew off. And that was the last she saw. But you'll see a little bit of her interview tonight on this preview of Monsters of the UFO. And it's a rare interview because, again, a lot of these people don't talk about these things because they've been so subject to ridicule over the years. But what I wanted to do, and Lisa agreed with me on this when we talked about doing this show, is that we wanted to try to get as many of these stories preserved as possible of people who had come face to face with an unknown phenomenon. And the Mothman, of course, was one of the strangest phenomenon ever. To make a long story short, the Silver Bridge that spans the Ohio River, as most of you know, have seen the movie, they did depict that in the movie. It collapsed on December 15th, 1967. That's interesting. That was 13 months. Talk about synchronicities again. 13 months to the day of the first sighting. The official explanation for the collapse of the bridge was IBAR number 13. They said it was a faulty bolt, which it might have been. Whether the Mothman had anything to do with it, we don't know. There were a lot of strange things going on. Mary Heyer, who John Keel befriended, she was a reporter for the Athens Messenger. She was the first one to break the story in the Point Pleasant newspapers about Mothman. And by the way, they saw so many UFO sightings they had lost count. There were so many UFO sightings and animal mutilations in the area. That you didn't see in the movie. That happened. But Mary Heyer was involved in this. She had supposedly men in black that came into her office, even, sounds silly, but a dwarf-like person who didn't seem to even know what a pencil sharpener was. But he wanted to know about the UFO sightings, because Mary and John had seen UFOs up, I believe it was near Dry Ridge Hill there, in the area. Mary started having visions. She started seeing Christmas packages floating in the water before, 2-3 weeks before the bridge collapsed. Of course, that bridge, when it collapsed, it killed 46 people. And a lot of those people were Christmas shoppers. And when the divers went in and when the people were trying to rescue those who did survive, they found Christmas packages floating all over with all the other debris. It was a really cold day. It was one of the coldest days. I remember, again, I was in high school at that time. I remember that day when it happened. It was very, very cold that day. A bitter, bitter cold day. So anyway, what we're going to take a look at is still a work in progress. So I hope you'll forgive us for not having it totally fine-tuned like I like to do on the shows that I do, but it's a work in progress. So some of the effects are kind of temporary. Some of the UFO effects are not the greatest, but they're okay for now, because I want to be able to at least show you guys something from this show. You'll be the first audience to see any of this material. My editor, Steve Robin, who's here tonight, he did a great job putting all this together. And actually, you'll see some of the Osborne children who are sitting right here. They're in the Flatwoods story, and they did a nice job in that, trying to recreate the stories. Because what I wanted to do is try to do some really neat little recreations, you know, to try to encapsulate these stories and what happened back at that time. So many recreations, you know, are kind of just very cheesily done. Some of the sound effects we got, there's some screaming that I'm going to replace. I didn't like. we were in a hurry trying to get some of these things together for you guys tonight. But it's an interesting story. The only thing I might mention, we have all the recreation shot. You won't see all of the material, because when this show comes out, it's going to be a 2-hour special. It'll be on Sci-Fi, hopefully. And the Mothman we are planning to do next month. We're going to recreate the car chase and the Marcella Bennett story, because I feel those are two of the strongest eyewitness events that happened. So bear with us if it's not the final. This is just going to be a 25-minute kind of condensed version of the 3 stories, but I think it's going to be interesting. Watch carefully when you see the Mothman story. Watch Marcella Bennett. I'll let her interview go a little longer than I would normally let an interview go, because I think she's just that good and that convincing. And I hope she'll convince you too, because this is something I believe really did happen, and it's still an anomaly to this day. So with further ado, we'll roll the film.
Improvised search parties are combing Dry Ridge Mountain, attempting to find it. Just what it is, no one is sure.
But it was the worst terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Any second, I was expecting this creature to just reach down with claws and just pick me up and fly away.
My name is O.P. Baker, and I was in the house that night, and I saw them creatures.
And I looked up, and I saw this big light. It just went so fast, and it was so low. I had no idea what it was, but I knew it was something different.
They ran up the ridge where there's a path. There was one oak tree growing isolated right on the top of the ridge. This kid pointed up to this branch, and underneath the branch, apparently suspended in the air, was a creature or thing or an object.
I believe very firmly in the world of science and nature and religion that a lot of things occur for which we human beings have little or no explanation.
If you're in trouble, you're looking for a flat place close. You don't want to run into a mountain. You don't want to hit trees. Any kind of a clearing, please, you know. And so when I saw the physical situation, then I could understand. Of course that would be where they would go. That's the highest point in the area. It's large enough to take whatever you got. I'm very intrigued with this case. Small town. I talked to a psychologist just today who said the similarity of the drawings of kids over a wide spread of ages, and he's from this town, is quite remarkable. You can't program kids over that wide a distribution to come up with something so similar independently.
I knew there was something. I knew they saw something because I saw it go over. And I know these people personally, and they're not the type of people that would tell a story like that because there were too many of them involved, but they actually saw something.
There were a group of boys playing football together on the side of the mountain, and they saw something come down, and they changed their mind about football and took up some other flying object instead.
They saw something, because I know I saw something.
What is it? What's happening? Would you look at that? Wow, a fireball. Let's get out of here. Go, go!
And they saw this object coming over, and they ran up to the house and told us there was a flying saucer coming over. It was landing on the hill behind our home.
Boys came, they threw their ball in, and Mother said, "What are you doing throwing that ball in the house?" You know how mothers are. And they told her what had happened. They had seen a flying saucer go over. And she said, "Well, you're not going without me." So out she went.
I'll be darned, what in the world is that? See? We was telling the truth. Let's go see what it is, you guys. I gotta see what it is.
Now hold your horses. Maybe a plane crash.
Mrs. May and a young man aged 18 who had just joined the National Guard, I think, or the services or something, was visiting with her. Some other people came out and they grabbed a big flashlight because it was just getting dark, and they saw this huge thing lying in the field about 2 fields away, up by the crest.
Hey, Gene.
How y'all doing? Where'd your plane crash?
We never said it was any kind of plane, Gene. Look.
Well, what do you know? Come on, you guys, that's gotta be a plane crash. This could be an emergency.
I didn't believe these boys at first either, Gene, but as you can see, something's really up there. Here, you better take this. It's getting pretty dark.
You guys ready? They may need help. Come on.
When they got up top of the hill, as they began to approach the summit of the hill, they saw what looked like a mist of some kind drifting down from the top of the hill. And as they got higher in the hill, they began to smell something like oil or sulfur, depending upon the viewpoint, I guess. Anyhow, they began to choke up with their nose, and it interfered with their eyes as well.
It was standing upright and making no noise, but was pulsing with very bright light from cherry red to very pale orange.
They had seen it land up on that knoll, and that's where they were headed. So they were totally surprised when they saw the monster come out from behind that tree as they were on their way up to the knoll.
Is that an animal up there?
They were startled and they turned the light on to a nearby area trying to figure out what was going on. This huge creature showed up in front of them.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Run!
Something like a monster scared the heck out of them.
Well, these people definitely saw something that they couldn't explain.
It was all true, and God knows that I wouldn't do anything and tell a big story like that just to get somebody riled up, scare them nearly to death. Well, there's people scared silly over it.
None of those people were telling lies, those from Flatwoods especially, that the 400 odd other people whom we interviewed, including the young man who reported to the police the crash, and those young farmers, were certainly not lying.
It was August of 1955 that the news broke of a very unusual event, the likes of which had never been experienced before in the life of Hopkinsville in Christian County, Kentucky.
My father, he worked at a carnival, and they was all there just getting together because he hadn't seen home for a while, and they was all just sitting around talking when all this come about. And I believe it's Billy Ray went to get a drink of water, and that's when he seen the shiny object in the field.
And it scared him so that he went inside to tell his family, and in disbelief they put him down as a joke and told him to, they sort of said, don't be doing this again, you're doing this all the time. Until later on that evening when everything really started happening with beings supposedly attacking the house.
What are you trying to tell us, son?
Well, what I'm trying to tell you, I was just out at the well pumping some water when something came down out of the sky, a bright light or something, I don't know what. It flew lickety-split across the field out there, and it looked like it landed somewhere down in the gully.
Okay, here he goes again. Billy Ray, you are not only a very bad card player, you are a really bad liar to boot.
Oh, why would I lie about something like that?
And they kind of just shook it off until they started seeing the beans approach the house. Then they took it serious.
What in the blazes is going on with those darn dogs, Lucky? I told you to get rid of them varmints. I can't hear myself think, let alone read a good
Shut your
book.
trap there. You be still.
From what people tell us, they saw the lights landing back over in here. Back when I was a little kid, there was two big, almost perfectly circled indents of the ground, and
We used to take kids back here when I was a kid and tell them that's where they landed.
I remember we all were sitting there about, I'd say around 8 o'clock, maybe, you know, we heard a noise on top of the roof.
Listen, Mom, listen. There's something on the roof.
It is told that these beings were on the roof, scratching and clawing, trying to get through the ceiling, and the children and the females, the mothers and such, that were in the house at the time were trying to hide, trying to get away from this. They were all scared.
Make it go away, make it go away, please make it go away.
Be strong, little one. Be strong. It's okay. It's okay. Shh.
The house stood actually in front of the well. It was just basically a shotgun house. 2 big rooms on each end, a little old like hall where the front door was. Had the back door coming out this way.
Well, he said they would come up to the windows and they just kind of stick to the side of a house like a spider could. And he said they just kind of peek around the windowsill with their heads and with them little big beady eyes, and they just look in the window and just stare.
There was a gun battle involved where they were trying to shoot at them. They said they were attacking the house, attacking the people.
Yeah, I was kind of real scared. I was in the corner of the house on the floor, and everybody was running around there just panicked.
And Aunt Glennie was a very Christian-like lady, and she was a Pentecostal, a holiness lady, and she was a very, very truthful person, but this scared her to death, and she had to move out this summer.
He stuck his head out the door. One of them green men reached down and got him by the hair of the head and picked him up. Well, he said, we got to do something. And that's all he said, and they got up and grabbed the shotguns and started shooting.
They shot at them, but it didn't hurt them. It just kind of rolled up in a little ball and kind of rolled back down the hill over there where the ship was. I mean, you could see this big bright light, they said.
And I know this for a fact. They had shot out one of the windows and shot through the wall of the house. And there is photography that shows today that this happened. As to whether it was actually a confrontation between another being or human, I can't say for sure, but I do know that there are facts proving that something of a higher power had landed in their backfield.
It is reported that a newspaper reporter from the Evansville, Indiana Courier adopted a journalistic license and decided in his article to refer to them as, quote, the little green men of Kelly. And there The AP and UPS picked it up, and it stuck.
Look, it's here.
Oh, what is it, Mom? Well, no, that cannot be.
Please, it's not gonna harm us.
How do we know that?
Oh, for God's sakes, don't!
I'm gonna shoot that little man!
I could see the fear in his eyes when he told me the story. And I know for a fact it happened. It happens all over the world every day, and people don't want to believe it.
Chief Greenwell made many trips back to Kelly to interview members of the family, trying to pinpoint the validity of the whole story. And he said when he interviewed the grandmother each time, one thing, she stuck to her story all the way through. There was an indefinable fear in her eyes that he questioned. She must have seen something that absolutely scared her from amazing grace to floating opportunity.
Was it paranormal? Was it Satanism? I think what's more important is really to understand that these people, these ordinary people at Point Pleasant, had an extraordinary situation happen to them.
This is where it all began back in November 15th, 1966. Right behind me is where the old power station was located. It's gone now. It's been disassembled. But this is where the first Mothman sighting occurred, or the first major Mothman sighting, with two couples actually seeing the creature around one of the corners of the power plant. And they drove from here back through town and reported seeing it another few times on their way back, and included the creature flying over their car as they made their way back down the road.
Well, we were in the TNT area chasing barkers. It was about 11:30 at night. It was real cold. And we topped like a little rise in the road, and our lights shone on this thing in front of the powerhouse. And it was about 7 foot tall, and it had red eyes and arms, and you could see the muscles in its legs. It's like a regular man. But we never did see a face on it, because the eyes was just like they hypnotized you. All we could see was the eyes.
They decided to leave in the car, and as they were leaving, the creature followed them, flew over top of their car, and followed them about almost a mile into towards the Point Pleasant area.
And it started flying over top of us, and got so close to the car that its wings hit the side of the car and put scratches on it.
Whenever someone would look close to its head and neck area, you couldn't see its head nor neck. All you could see were its eyes. And its eyes were hypnotizing, and just captivated them when they very first saw it. The TNT area just outside the North Power Plant.
We was going to turn around there at the C.C. Lewis's farm, and we backed up, and it ran over top of the car, and there was a big dead dog laying there. So instead of going back up the road, we went on down the road, and we decided to go back up, and the dog was gone. I don't know if it took it or what happened. It was a great big one.
Yeah, one night this particular person, his dogs were barking and all that, and this one dog ran behind their barn and started chasing something, and they never saw their dog again. They never found the dog. The dog was never to be seen again. So little things like that kept coming about, and pretty soon there was an actual fear in our community.
This is desolate Dry Ridge Mountain, where last night a strange and eerie thing happened.
It was this big orange glowing light, you know. So we stopped the car and the thing came over top of the car. We got all kinds of static on the radio and the car quit.
Well, most rational people think it was just a large gray stork or a heron or something that was migrating, but the people that sighted the thing, it was just too big to have been that, you know.
The day after the Mallet-Scarberry encounter on November 16th, 1966, Marcella Bennett and her family went to visit a friend near the TNT area.
And my brother had drew my attention to look to my right and see this light. And I said, no, 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 you know. And he kept insisting that I look and see what was coming in the sky, the light. And I turned and I glanced and I saw the light. And I continued walking on towards the car, and I was the driver that night. And I had my daughter, Tina, 4 years old, in my arms, and I walked up to the passenger side of the car instead of the driver's side. And I still don't know why, but when I did, I looked down, glanced down to the door to get a hold of the door handle. When I did, I saw this gray figure standing, kind of leaning on the side of my car. And I started from the legs and started looking up. And when I started looking up, I could see it was something that I had never saw before in my life. And it looked like a human, but it looked like it had wings like a bird, and it had its head kind of stuck down in like a bird, and its shoulders kind of back like that, and was looking at me. And I just freaked out. It was beyond my imagination of ever seen a creature that looked like that. And I wasn't even thinking. The only thing I could think was that I wanted to turn and run. And when I turned to run, I fell and on top of my daughter. And when I fell on top of my daughter, I could hear her crying, but I was just like I was paralyzed. I couldn't move my body. And when I tried to get up, I couldn't. My face was in the sand, and I had a cigarette in my right hand, and it had burnt. I could feel the burning of my fingers burning, but I still couldn't move. And then I heard my brother calling my name, get up, come on. And I couldn't, and he didn't get within 3 feet of me. He was that far away, so finally I managed to get up and tried to run, and I got to him. And then he said, get in the house fast. And we went in the house. And whatever the creature was, I could hear it in the back of me. Well, first of all, when I was lying on the ground, any second, I was expecting this creature to just reach down with claws and just pick me up and fly away. It was just that I just had that feeling that it was just going to pick me up and fly away with me.
But it was a real cold day, and the bridge that went across from Point Pleasant to Ohio broke, and it was loaded with cars and trucks and whatever. It broke and creeled over and fell into the river, and killing 46 people.
When my car stopped on me, my tires was right on the ledge where it broke off. And as I got down, I could see the bridge was falling. And people were hollering and all.
How far were you from absolute safety?
I'd over a car length. Might have been another car length. I'd have made it.
The evening before the bridge fell, the Mothman was supposed to have been sighted by several people that were roosting up on top of the spire, the tallest spire on the bridge. And ever since that evening before the bridge fell, ever since the bridge that evening, the Mothman has never been sighted in this area again.
And who is he, and what is he, and where did he come from, and what is his purpose here? We know what we saw. It just terrified me even to go back to the scene the next day. It's the worst terrifying thing I've ever experienced. It's just beyond your wildest imagination.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. You kind of get an idea of kind of what we're driving for. You know, we're trying to bring out some of these rare stories, getting the rare interviews. I was wondering before we go to Q&A, we'll do this rather quickly. I'd like to talk just briefly about a monster of a different kind of UFO, and that's a monster that resides in the haunting phenomena that I had investigated with Dr. Barry Taff. In 1989, we were involved in a pretty spectacular case, violent case of a haunting in San Pedro, California, that actually wound up in, this entity was in this house. I had a camera, I documented a lot of things. It wound up hanging my sound man. He didn't die, but another fellow got him down there. He was hung in the attic of the house. We have actual photographs, a lot of actual footage, very little recreation. It's mostly real footage. So without further ado, we're going to roll that. So this is about 10 minutes. Thank you.
One of the strangest stories of a haunting in California happened here in 1989. At the time, a young woman named Jackie Hernandez was living in this simple clapboard house in the sleepy harbor town of San Pedro. After hearing what at first seemed to be footsteps coming from her attic, Jackie grew more frightened when objects apparently flew of their own accord, and a menacing apparition of a corpse-like old man began to manifest in her children's bedroom.
Every time I've seen him, he's always been cross-legged. He's got a grayish, he looks like he's a corpse. It looks like a corpse. And he's got a grayish tone to him, and he's wearing a red flannel shirt, and his shirt is tucked in. His pants are high waters, and they're like those gasoline pants.
Out of desperation, her friend Susan Castaneda phoned Dr. Barry Taff, who investigated the entity case. She told him that she had witnessed strange events in the home as well. What followed turned into one of the greatest paranormal nightmares ever. Assisted by professional cameraman Barry Conrad and his assistant Jeff Wheatcraft, the group decided to investigate the house.
And she's talking about disembodied heads and things in the attic.
I felt something behind me, so I kind of I turned real quick, and as I turned, there was a head, and it was just the head, and it was coming for me, right towards me, and I just freaked and just fell.
And I'm thinking, yeah, right. Very doubtful that anything like this would actually occur, that anybody would see it. And that's when I ask, let's see the attic. Let's go up there, or at least open the attic door and see what we can find.
On August 8th, 1989, Jeff Wheatcraft climbed into the attic for the first time, and amazingly, something unseen grabbed his camera.
I started clicking off some photos. It was dark, totally dark. I fired first, I fired second, and just as I fired into the third frame, something pulled this camera from my hands.
And we all hear this scream. We hear Jeff just this loud scream, and everybody, instantly runs to the kitchen, which is right there by the laundry room, and we see Jeff. Jeff comes out of the attic, and he looks as white as a ghost himself. He was shaking.
I go back up there with lights this time, with a flashlight. I don't see my camera in the position that I was. I look back in the corner. All of a sudden, I see just the lens sitting there. The other corner of the attic was the body of the camera lying upside down with the lens port laying straight down into a box, just an old crate that was in the attic. Now talk about your first fright right there. I knew there had to be something. There had to be something in that attic.
While the evidence was mounting that something bizarre was indeed taking place in the Hernandez household, no one could have guessed just how bizarre when this strange liquid began to ooze from the house's walls one evening in late August.
There it is.
There it is, right there.
It's dripping.
The first night we were at the Hernandez house, Jackie told us about some viscous liquid dripping and oozing from various parts of the house. But we took some of the, I guess, liquid ooze, for lack of a better term, back to a lab to have it analyzed. Upon analysis, it was determined this was human blood plasma with a high copper and iodine content, and it was male blood.
Is there anything over this? Right down here in the corner, Jeff.
They tried to figure out a logical solution for, why it was happening, or possibly coming from a pipe, or what it could possibly be coming from other than just the walls. But there was no logical explanation.
Later, on September 4th, Conrad received a desperate call at his home from Jackie.
I'm not staying here, Barry. I'm out of here. I gotta get out of here. I can't stay here.
Responding to the call, the group, assisted by Conrad's friend Gary Bain, arrived at the house. While Jackie appeared nervous and frightened, nothing else seemed out of the ordinary until Jeff and Gary decided to venture once more into the attic.
Well, I guess I'm going to go up, and then Jeff's going to come up and check out what's happening tonight. Jeff, you okay?
I'm fine. I feel a little queasy about going up there, but then I guess I'll go up. If I got a partner, why, it's so bad.
Jackie's neighbor, Susan Castaneda, dropped in for a visit after learning of her friend's difficulties that night. Not long after, the group downstairs, including Conrad, saw a strange floating light accompanied by unexplained snapping sounds. It was only moments afterwards that Conrad pushed the button on his camcorder and recorded a groan from the attic above. What you are about to see is not a dramatization. It is real.
What's wrong?
What happened? I told you, get down! Get down!
There was a momentary space in there where everything went black.
Jeff Wheatcraft was physically attacked in this attic on September 4th, 1989 by an invisible force that actually pulled him up onto a nail protruding from a rafter beam and actually tried to strangle him to death.
I don't remember being lifted up there, but I was actually hung. I was hung in an attic, and he helps me off of this nail.
He had a horrible time getting Jeff down from there, and those were very anxious moments that passed because we didn't know whether to go up there or what. We knew something happened.
Right now, Jeff, what happened?
Put something around my neck.
Look at this. Oh, shit.
Oh, my God.
He was scared.
Jeff, please get down.
I gotta get out of here.
Well,
it's definitely raising him.
Jeff, please come here. Get this for me. Keep the mic. Jeff, here you go, buddy. Here you go. What happened? Are you okay, buddy?
Oh, shit. God.
Look at his neck. Jeff, what's behind your neck?
I don't know what's on my neck.
Look at this. A piece of rope.
Oh, shit.
Gary, get down on this, buddy.
Can you find my glasses?
Gary, Jeff.
Look at this.
Jeff, turn the camera.
Jeff, are you okay?
Jeff.
I'm fine.
Jeff, tell me what happened, buddy.
Well, I don't know, Gary. I told Gary that there was nothing happening up there, and he turned around and came. He was coming this way. All of a sudden, I feel this thing around my neck, and it's got me hanging, and it's pulling on my leg.
You were hanging?
Yeah, I was hanging. Gary had to bring me down. What has happened, actually? I'm pulled to the side of the attic, and there's nobody up there, and I know that Gary's standing there, and he has nothing to do with it. He's at a distance from me. I see the flash from his camera. I remember that. And I know he said something to me, but I don't recall exactly what he said. But here I try to rationalize this in my mind, and I just can't do it. It's that frightening.
Get a picture of his neck. Look at this.
Look at his neck. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
If I had not been there, he would have strangled, and he would have probably died there in that attic if I had not been here to get him down, because he didn't know what was going on, and it was wrapped so tightly that I couldn't get him off of the nail. It was over a nail, and I finally had to actually bend the nail down
straight to even get the rope off of it.
Not long after Jeff had emerged from the attic, Jackie was alarmed when she noticed a strange scarlet mark on her baby daughter's forehead.
I don't know. Look at what's on the baby. Come on, you guys. Let's go. Please, let's go. Please, let's go. Please, what happened to her? Oh, my God.
It freaked me out because it came so close to my kids. And it was almost as if it was saying to me, hey, I can do what I want to. Don't tell me that not to mess with your kids, because if I want to, I will.
What is that? What the fuck is it doing to my kids now? Let's get these guys out of here, Barry.
During the haunting, multiple orbs of light were videotaped by Conrad as he concentrated on documenting the events as they transpired.
Some of the more spectacular lights that I photographed were lights that occurred later on in the case. We recorded a sort of pea pod looking light. It looked like an object with 3 little cotton balls in it, and it actually traveled throughout the frame, and it disappeared for a frame, actually blinked out for a frame, and one object actually entered her head.
Barry didn't show me this film footage right away. He took them a while before I finally got to see it, because they were afraid of what my reaction to it would be, which was that of fear. It freaked me out to think that this thing was inside of me, or that these lights were going inside of me. It was bad enough having them around me, but it was a very weird feeling, you know, when I saw that film, and it still is. Every time I look at it, I get a weird feeling.
Subjected to a rigorous analysis by aerospace physicist Dr. James Robin of Los Angeles, no explanation for the anomalies was ever found.
The most, I guess, impressive thing that I saw in all of Barry's tapes that I saw was this phenomena of these streaks of light. Basically taking all of them into account, and I saw maybe 2 dozen or 3 dozen events over maybe 6 hours worth of tapes, is that there's no real logical explanation for them. They have too much of a unusual phenomena. I'm convinced that they emit their own light, number one. They all have a very smooth flight path. Bugs, insects are very jerky in their motion. These were all very well-defined paths. And they all had basic characteristics that were common. I personally, looking at them, cannot explain where they come from, what they are. Considering the whole situation that Barry is investigating, the possibility that they could be an apparition, I think is very strong.
Following the hanging incident, Jackie, in desperation, moved into this small trailer home near Weldon, California. Set among the high Sierras, her new home was a welcome relief from the stress she'd suffered in San Pedro. Until the spring, when strange scratching noises began to emanate from this storage shed located behind the house. At the Weldon location, this enigmatic light was captured by Barry Conrad as it sped towards the interior of this storage shed behind the trailer she was living in. During a Ouija seance held that same night, researchers were startled when paranormal phenomena broke out in the room, culminating with another attack by unseen forces upon photographer Jeff Wheatcraft.
It felt like something was coming up right here at this point and striking me, lifting me up out of the chair and throwing me against the trailer wall.
Well, I personally saw a man levitate right in front of me and get thrown against a trailer wall with unbelievable power.
I saw Jeff get thrown. I think all of us thought that we seen a man get murdered by a ghost.
According to experts, most poltergeist cases are short-lived, often burning themselves out after only a few short weeks or months. But surprisingly, the psychic predator responsible for the hauntings in San Pedro had an amazing resiliency. Jackie Hernandez reported that her haunting, which began early in 1989, didn't fade from the scene until mid-1991. Was it a ghost from the past? A telekinetic product of Jackie's own mind that created the events witnessed by so many? Or something else? Something beyond the five senses made its presence here in 1989. There are simply too many witnesses. And to this day, no one has yet been able to explain what happened to Jackie, making it truly one of the most incredible and terrifying hauntings in California's history. The Golden State has certainly had her share of ghost stories over the years. From a haunted hospital near Los Angeles to the San Pedro ghost, spirits seem to have been taking up residence here for quite some time. These true accounts would seem to suggest that something is out there. Whether you're frightened or not, the next time you're all alone on a fog-shrouded stretch of beach somewhere along the California coastline, maybe you'll encounter a phantom from the world beyond, and then you too will become the next chapter in the continuing saga of California's most haunted.
Thank you. That was an old piece of film I did a long time ago, so I don't think I'm going to grow that beard back. But but it was a scary thing. It was a really frightening thing. I saw a guy levitate right in front of me. There's no question about it. That was a recreation that you saw. We would have got it on camera. Our cameras were neutralized, as they were several times. But the hanging photos were real. That footage you saw of him coming out of the attic, that was real. Monsters of the UFO. Again, we pick up strange lights that could be UFOs. They are UFOs, but they're found in haunted houses. So I'm sure there's some kind of crossover to UFO phenomena that we don't know about yet that needs to be explored. Anyway, I'm going to try to cut this short because I know we're running a little late. I'd like to bring up Lisa McIntosh and introduce her. She's the co-producer of the show, my girlfriend. And if we could just take a couple quick questions, we'll do the best we can to answer any questions.
Is my mic on yet? Wait, push the button, Max. I don't know. Come on, boss. Ralph.
Where's Ralph?
Ralph. Having a Basically, I'll use my projection and let you know we're going to start some questions and answers. We'd ask you to come up to this microphone. Please, one question per person at a time. If you want to ask more, you can get to the end of the line, but we want to get as many people through as possible. And please, a lot of people have stories they want to tell and stuff. Just make sure you have a question for our guests. That's all we ask. Please state it in the form of a question. And who's next? I actually don't have one right now. So. Come on up, step up to the microphone. And it's not on yet. Ralph?
He's in there.
He's working on it, so just speak loudly.
Just be courteous and one question, please, and then let somebody else ask a question. Thank you.
Yeah, coincidentally, around late May or early June of '89, I saw a UFO in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I haven't...
it was June of '89?
More or less. I couldn't... It was some device that affected my memory. I couldn't remember the day. I associated it with the Pan-Pacific Fire. It was sometime after that. If you remember the Pan-Pacific Fire.
Yeah, I can remember that, yeah.
It was around the spring of '89. And I just remember it was very warm. And it seemed to have blown out my memory of the day I saw it, or when the Pan-Pacific Fire was. I had kind of, later on that year, backtracked my memory after I heard an interview with Timothy Good, who wrote the book Above Top Secret.
Right.
He was interviewed on the Michael Jackson KBC radio program in the fall of that year.
Yes.
Anyway, to fast forward to the present, have you done any investigation of the Chupacabra?
That's a good question. Actually, I have not, but I have a friend who did some investigation of that in Puerto Rico right after those stories broke. And it is a very fascinating phenomenon because he had all kinds of footage down there that they got from local news agencies of animals' mutilations that don't look normal at all. And I believe that there are small puncture marks that they find on these animals, and some of the internal organs that seem to be removed through those puncture marks, which I found fascinating. It's something I'd like to investigate further. There is some similarity to that, I think, in Mothman in some respects, because I think the Chupacabra has been reported as having wings, and this thing flies. Obviously not a man-like thing as far as I know, but I have not investigated it, but it's something I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah. Well, it could be more or less related to the cattle mutilations we've had in this country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Thank you.
Excuse me, have any of these alleged UFO monsters ever carried people off to like undersea or underground alien bases, or carried them off-world to other planets in this solar system or other solar systems where sometimes they may not return for another few days, weeks, months, or years, or sometimes they don't return at all? Do they ever just kidnap people? I mean, carry them away?
Well, I don't know firsthand. I wish I did, but we can go back to the Travis Walton case. That was a very good abduction case. That was something that happened in 1975 in Arizona, and I don't recall that he was taken to a planet, but he was taken on board the ship. Other than that, I don't know of any other story.
No, but I mean something more monstrous, like the Mothman, or those apparitions just literally carrying people away, sort of like out of those comic books, but for real instead of fiction.
Carrying, like apparitions, carrying people off. Well, it's interesting you mentioned kidnapping people. There have been a lot of strange vanishings, a lot of strange disappearances over the years that related to UFO phenomena, also ghost phenomena. Actually, I might mention Dr. Taft's case, the entity, the lady who was besieged by this entity in 1974. No one seems to know where she's at today. We try to locate her. No one knows where she's gone. She was the one who was followed by this entity in 1974. It followed her from home to home, much like in the San Pedro case, and she's disappeared. Whether that is something else, whether she died somewhere that we just, in obscurity, that's another question, but that's something I probably couldn't answer. I really don't know.
Well, do you know the number of people who disappeared?
I'd say there's quite a few vanishings every year. I would say a lot more than we realize. Probably a lot more than goes reported. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, this question's for Lisa. You actually tried to organize the interviews, Barry said, right? So you were the initial contact. What was the reaction of the people that you called out of the blue? Did they indicate, I mean, first of all, were they hostile? Were they receptive? And did they indicate that people have still been contacting them after all these years?
Most of them were pretty friendly. There's still some to this day that are terrified. One lady in particular is afraid to go outside and look up after she saw the Mothman, and that's been 40 years ago. Jeez. So most people are friendly to us. We do have people that will not talk to us. They're still afraid. We got an interview with someone who encountered the Flatwoods Monster, and he's going to talk to us next month, so we'll add that to the show.
Great, thank you.
Kind of a mixture.
I might just mention, this has been the hard part doing this show, is trying to find these interviews. They're very tough, trying to get people to come forward, especially after so many years, it's so long ago. So to get any of these interviews, I feel it's like a miracle to me.
I was wondering, what was the noose around Wheatcraft's neck made out of?
That's a very interesting question. That noose was a clothesline cord, I guess that's vinyl, like a vinyl clothesline cord. And it was an old weathered cord, and it was not in that attic. It was not in the attic when we searched it before that time, because we were down there many other nights before that. That was tied in a very specific knot, as is mentioned. It was a bowline knot, a bowline knot, which is a nautical knot. And that was interesting because here we are in San Pedro, where a lot of seamen have lived over the years and died. And it's interesting. If you're going to get hung by a ghost, as preposterous as that sounds, and the knot is a nautical knot, what better place than San Pedro? But it was a nautical knot, and it was an old, like an old weathered vinyl clothesline cord. I might mention something about that cord. It's interesting. That cord was in my possession in 1989 after the hanging of Jeff Wheatcraft. That was kept in a top, it was in a top drawer in the kitchen. Shortly after, there's more to this story than we had on this particular California Most Haunted, but that there was an outbreak of poltergeist activity at my apartment where I used to live in those days, and it was here in Studio City, really close, just a few blocks away from here on Tujunga Avenue. And there was we came home after we'd taken polygraph tests, because we all passed the polygraphs relating to this case. I insisted we do all that, because this thing, I wanted to prove this really happened. But we came home that night, me and Jeff Wheatcraft, and we were there and putting the equipment away with this and that. And there was a the kitchen table, or kitchen chair, wound up on top of the kitchen table. And then the back door started opening and closing of its own accord. And the next day, that cord disappeared. It was no longer in the drawer. So that's interesting. It's almost like this ghost came back to reclaim it.
In the depiction of the aliens, the monsters during the first film, the first and the third one, of course the Mothman being a rather unique thing, are pretty unusual. Never seen anything like that before. But the second group, the Kelly group, seem to be, they look a lot like Greys.
Oh, I see. Yeah, there is a real strong similarity, especially in the size.
Did you think they were Greys there? Is there anything to make a case that they were something other than Greys?
It's possible, except that the arms are obviously long, like Greys. I believe Greys are reported to have very long arms. Is that correct?
They can.
Yeah.
They have only 4 digits too, I think. So.
4 digits.
Yeah.
You may have to tell me on the Greys. Do they have? These things did have claws. They said they had like talons. So
I think that's a little different than the standard depiction of such. But it's also been theorized that the shorter Greys particularly are actually genetically engineered.
Right. Now that's interesting. That's an interesting question. They definitely have the same size, the same basic shape, but whether they are Greys or from some other, it's hard to say.
The first alien, the really tall with the red head.
Yes, the Flatwoods Monster.
Yeah, that kind of strikes me a little bit like the tall, clothed Greys that have been rumored to be controlling smaller, like genetically engineered Greys.
Oh, that's interesting, right?
But you say with this totally red face.
Totally, it was described as being perfectly round, blood red. But the Ace of Spades thing was. Do you know? Are any of these other Greys, the tall Greys, have they been reported with that inverted Ace of Spades? I don't know. Not to my knowledge. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know enough myself, but I've heard about gowns.
Yes.
And them being clothed a little bit different than the other ones, but actually having capes with maybe a collar that can come up almost like a Dracula sort of thing.
Yes.
So I have heard a little bit about that, but that I don't know about.
Now this was interesting. It was kind of unique. If it does have similarity to the creatures you mentioned, I mean it's possible, but I don't know to my knowledge. It's just a hard thing to speculate on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry, thanks so much. We don't have time for any more questions. We're almost out of tape, but thanks so much, Barry. Let's give him a hand again, guys.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.